Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Potter, and today I'm going to be going over a presentation and I'll be covering NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. When I first started in the cybersecurity industry, I kept noticing that I would see NIST all over the place, whether it was in job requirements, certifications, or cybersecurity documentation. Uh, when I looked into this further, I just noticed that they were kind of everywhere. They had their hands in everything. So today we're going to lay out exactly what NIST is and how and what this means to anyone working in the IT or cybersecurity industry. So let's get into it.
So if you spent any time in IT or cybersecurity, you run into NIST at some point, whether you realize it or not. One of those fundamental pieces that underpins a huge chunk of how we operate security standards in this country. So let's break it down. So what is NIST? NIST is a non-regulatory federal body under the Department of Commerce. Now that non-regulatory part really stands out to me because NIST on its own doesn't actually have any enforcement powers to itself. It simply publishes standards and guidelines, and then laws and regulations give those documents teeth. NIST has actually been around since 1901, originally focused on things like weights and measurements, and they still do quite a bit of that today. They actually do things like fire protection and everything else as well. Now, for the cybersecurity side, it didn't really take off until the Obama administration issued an executive order in 2013, which basically said that we need a consistent framework to protect critical infrastructure from cyber threats. Now that kicked off the cybersecurity framework that we use today. The government, meaning Congress, actually followed that up by the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2014, and from there, NIST's role in the security space has only grown since then. So who does NIST actually affect? The short answer is almost everyone who touches federal data or critical infrastructure. Federal agencies are the most obvious because they require to follow NIST standards under FISMA. Defense contractors have to comply with NIST 800-171 if they're handling controlled unclassified information. Critical infrastructure sectors such as like energy, water, healthcare, and finance either adopt the CSF voluntarily or are pulled in through sector-specific regulations. Healthcare is another good example because HIPAA's security rules align very tightly with NIST Special Publication 866. Now, just keep in mind that this is not just a US thing either. NIST CSF has actually been adopted internationally by governments and private enterprise in the EU, Japan, and Israel, among others. If your organization does business with the federal government in any capacity, NIST is always going to be on your radar. So, the most well-known piece of NIST is the cybersecurity framework, and at its core, it functions around five primary functions. These are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Think of this as a life cycle. You first want to start out by identifying your assets and your risks. You're then going to want to protect anything that is within your control to the best of your ability. You're then going to want to be able to detect, which means you have eyes on all of those assets and ways to see if any activity on them. You then plan to respond to any sort of threats that may come into your environment. This includes things like playbooks and stuff like that. And then the final part is recovery, which basically you want to get back to normal operations as quickly as possible. So beyond the cybersecurity framework, there's also NIST Special Publication 800-53. Is a big one for security and privacy controls, especially in federal environments. There's Special Publication 800-171, which covers protecting critical unclassified information in non-federal systems, which is critical for contractors and the like. And then there's also the risk management framework, which you'll see a lot out there in the wild because it gives organizations a structured process to authorize and operate IT systems in a secure way. So, what happens if you don't follow NIST? If you're a federal contractor and you don't meet Special Publication 171 or the other requirements that you fall under, you can lose your contracts. The DoD is especially active in terminating agreements over this. For federal agencies themselves, failing a FISMA requirement means congressional scrutiny, potential budget cuts, and mandatory remediation audits, which is something that no one wants to have happen to them, because having the government all up in your systems is not great. On the private side, organizations in regulated industries such as healthcare and finance can face multi-million-dollar fines if a breach occurs and they can't show that they adequately protected what they had in place. And beyond the legal and financial hit, the reputational damage is real. And a good example of this is the 2020 SolarWinds attack and the 2015 OPM breach. Are both examples where gaps in NIST recommended controls contributed to massive exposures. Non-compliance isn't just a paperwork problem, it's a risk that shows up in the headlines. So how does NIST shape IT and cybersecurity jobs in the market today? This is where it gets personal for anyone in the field. On a day-to-day level, it's IT and cybersecurity professionals are consistently looking out ways and mapping controls to the NIST frameworks. Whether you're writing policies, running risk assessments, or preparing for an audit, NIST is the reference point. The risk management framework in particular drives the system authorization process in federal and DoD environments, which means security analysts have to understand how to categorize systems, select the controls that are required by that, and produce the documentation to support and authority to operate. On the defensive side, NIST Special Publication 861 is the standard guide for incident response. Most incident response teams structure their procedures around it. For system admins, you have NIST Special Publication 800-70 and SCAPE benchmarks that are you're referencing to hardening both endpoints and servers. And from a career standpoint, Security Plus, CISSP, and CAP all map directly to NIST concepts. This knowledge is not just operational stuff, it's for mid-level and above. So for my references for this, I stuck to the main NIST webpage for the most part. I also went to CySA and the CSRC. So if you want to, you can dig into the primary documentation and have a better look at all the frameworks that I covered today. And thank you very much for watching this presentation. Have a great day.